Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into some incredibly rich source material from a recent dialogue over on Faith Alive Conversations. Hosts Maya and Leah sat down with three fantastic guests, Pastor Daniel, Miriam, and Bishop Andrew, to really unpack the themes of Psalm 105. And what we're looking at today is how an ancient call to praise basically sets off this massive chain reaction. We're talking about a ripple effect that starts in the quietest, most private parts of our lives and literally expands outward to a global stage. So if you've ever wondered how your own personal spiritual life connects to a much larger historical mission, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it. Let's ground ourselves right at the source with verses 1, 3, and 4 from Psalm 105. It reads, "Give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done. Glory in his holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Look to the Lord and his strength. Seek his face always." These aren't just polite, poetic suggestions. They're active, dynamic commands. It's a call to praise, to proclaim, and to relentlessly seek God's presence. But what does it actually look like to put those action verbs into practice today? Well, Maya and Leah guided their guests through three distinct perspectives to answer exactly that. Section 1, From Worship to Witness, focusing on the pastoral view. Let's dive right into this first layer of the text, looking at the shift from internal worship to external witness through the eyes of Pastor Daniel. So, Pastor Daniel points out this super common tension in modern ministry. On one hand, you have believers experiencing God deeply in their private lives. They pray, they study, they feel this profound quiet connection. But then, there's a real tangible hesitation to cross over into public proclamation. People just kind of freeze up when it comes to actively testifying or speaking about God's works to others. And Pastor Daniel makes the point that Psalm 105 directly challenges that hesitation. It absolutely demands an outward movement of faith because praise just wasn't designed to stay internal. He actually summed up this crucial point with a fantastic quote: "Worship that overflows becomes witness." I just absolutely love that imagery. Think of a cup being filled with water. If you keep pouring, the water doesn't just vanish, right? It spills over the edges and gets on everything around it. Praise isn't meant to stay bottled up in our heads, or even just kept inside the four walls of a sanctuary. When worship is genuine and overflowing, it naturally, almost effortlessly, transforms into an active public witness. Moving right along to Section 2, Everyday Conversations of Faith, getting into the personal view. We've looked at the pastoral tension, so now let's see how this plays out in our practical, day-to-day lives with Miriam, who serves faithfully in her local church community. When we hear phrases like public proclamation, it can sound incredibly intimidating for a lot of us. We picture ourselves needing to stand up on a stage with a microphone and deliver some theological masterpiece. But Miriam reminds us that making known what he has done really doesn't require preaching sermons. Actually, scratch that. It's more like pulling a friend aside to encourage them. It's engaging in a small, passing conversation. It's simply sharing a personal story about how God helped you navigate a really tough week. These simple, relatable acts completely lower the barrier to entry for all of us. And I think this brilliantly illustrates a really profound truth about faith. Effective witness usually isn't found in grand, sweeping gestures. It's found in the quiet, consistent rhythms of our daily interactions. It's exactly that day in and day out faithfulness that Miriam points to. When you consistently show up with encouragement and a willingness to share your own journey, you're actually fulfilling the command of Psalm 105 right there in your neighborhood or your workplace or your own living room. All right, Section 3, the global church mission, shifting to the historical view. Let's zoom out from the individual believer and look at the collective calling of the church, guided by Bishop Andrew's insights. So let's focus on that specific phrase from verse 1, among the nations. Bishop Andrew explains that we shouldn't just read this as pretty poetry. It's a literal global mission. It speaks to the church collectively, the whole body. Throughout history, the church has carried this weighty, massive responsibility to declare God's works across completely different cultures and successive generations. It totally elevates our perspective from what we're just doing locally to what we are a part of on a grand historical scale. And that brings us to a really powerful two-step ripple effect. Bishop Andrew suggests that fulfilling this ancient scripture requires both steps working in tandem. Step 1 is that intimate, personal testimony we just talked about with Miriam, the daily consistency. But it doesn't stop there. It merges directly into Step 2, a grand divine assignment. meaning your personal story is actually a vital piece of a vast global puzzle that the collective church is tasked with building across the nations. How cool is that? Which brings us to section 4, Seeking His Face Today, where we'll synthesize the message. Let's tie the whole shebang together and see the full, awe-inspiring picture of what Psalm 105 is asking of us right now. When we look at the complete picture laid out like this, the progression of this biblical command is just beautiful. Look at how it ripples outward. We start with Pastor Daniel in the internal and pastoral sphere, where he highlights the need to overcome our own hesitations so our private worship can truly overflow. Then, that overflow moves into Miriam's local and personal sphere, applying it through consistency in our daily lives and the small conversations. And finally, it expands all the way to Bishop Andrew's global and historical sphere, reminding us that these daily acts of witness actually feed into a massive divine assignment to make God's works known across all cultures. It's just a breathtaking, unified vision. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. Knowing that your private praise is meant to overflow, knowing that you absolutely don't need to preach a sermon to be effective, and knowing that your individual story is part of a much larger global mission. In what specific everyday way are you going to turn your inward worship into outward witness today? Take that question with you. Think about who you might encourage today, or what small conversation you might start. Thank you so much for hanging out with me as we unpacked this amazing source material. Keep seeking, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.